Welcome to Gospel Truth with Andrew Wommack, celebrating 50 years of sharing God's unconditional love and grace. And now, Andrew continues teaching from the life-changing Word of God about Don't Limit God.
Welcome to our Wednesday's broadcast of the Gospel Truth. I'm now in the middle of my second week of teaching on Don't Limit God. The Lord spoke to me January the 31st, 2002, through Psalms chapter 78 and verse 41. And it says there that they turned back and tempted God and limited the Holy One of Israel. And God spoke to me through that and said I was limiting Him by my small thinking. And so I've been talking about this for a week and a half. And the bulk of what I've been saying is just trying to let people know that God has to have our cooperation to bring His will to pass in our life. And we don't always cooperate. We limit God. You know, a verse that I often hear people quote is Ephesians chapter 3, verse 20, that says, "Now unto Him who is able to do exceeding abundantly above all we ask or think." And they just talk about how God can do anything. He can do exceedingly abundantly above all we ask or think. But did you know that that's not what that verse says? If you take the whole verse, it goes on to say, according to the power that works in us. The word according to means in proportion to, or to the degree of. God is limited to how much we cooperate with Him. It's not our holiness, it's not our goodness. God is a God of grace. He doesn't just give us what we deserve. He's never had anybody qualified working for Him yet. There is forgiveness and grace, but we do have to believe. We do have to cooperate. Isaiah chapter 1 says, "If you be willing and obedient, you shall eat the good of the land." And we have to cooperate with God. And God spoke to me and told me I was limiting Him by my small thinking. So anyway, I've spent a lot of time on that. What I want to share with you today is some other things that were hindering me, and I wasn't even aware of it. If you would have come to me prior to God speaking to me and revealing this and opening my eyes, I would have told you, man, we were believing God because our ministry had doubled in 2 years period of time. I had been in the ministry for 34 years, but in the previous 2 years, it had doubled over what it had been 32 years taking me to get to this place, and then we doubled. So I thought, man, we're doing pretty good relative to what I had done in the past. But the Lord told me that I was limiting Him, that He had much more for me. And I've given some of these stats last week. I won't go back through that. But man, it has proven to be true. Our ministry has increased over 15 to 20 times what it was since the Lord spoke this to me. And we are seeing awesome things happen. But here's some other reasons. I've already talked about that I was just lazy. It was the cares of this world. I was just enjoying the relative ease of ministry, and I didn't want to put myself back under the gun again. And so I've already talked about that. But here's another thing that I believe hindered me, and I believe it's a hindrance to most people, and that is a fear of change. People resent change. They like things to be stable. They don't like the unknown. They want everything to be just the same. I've actually seen people before who had physical problems, but they had adjusted to it. And they would rather stay in the state that they were rather than to change and face possible failure and the unknown. I can think of one guy when I was in Seagoville, Texas. He had been a sheriff, and he had been shot, and because of that, he was paralyzed in his legs. And anyway, I ministered to him, and I prayed with him, and he had had an operation, and I forgot it was some kind of a gallbladder surgery or something, but they had a tube in him with a bag, and this operation was draining. He was sitting in a wheelchair, and I prayed with him, and he had been totally paralyzed in his legs. And I prayed with him, and he got to moving his legs and kicking his legs. He hadn't done that in, I forgot, 20 years or something like this. And so anyway, I said, well, get out of that wheelchair. And he says, I can't get out of that wheelchair. I've got this drainage. I've got this bag. And if I was to stand up, you know, they've made it so that I'm sitting down. If I stood up, that tube would come out. And this is back when I first got started in ministry. And so I just said, okay, whenever you get the tube taken out, then you get up and walk. Now I'd probably have him stand up and stick my finger in a hole or something. But I'm a lot bolder now than I was then. But anyway, I just let him go. And over a period of weeks, when he finally got the tube taken out, he was still in the wheelchair. And I went over and ministered to him, and he was paralyzed again. I prayed with him, and his legs began to move, but he never would get out of that wheelchair. So it's a long story, but finally I had another guy who was more mature in the Lord than me, and he went over, and he just discerned that this guy, even though God had manifested healing in his body, he didn't want to get out of that wheelchair. And that just shocked me. It never occurred to me that anybody would want to stay in a wheelchair. And anyway, he just got in this guy's face and he says, if you really believe God and if you want to be healed, you come to church tonight. And the guy said, well, I got something to do. And he says, no, you cancel whatever else you're doing. You come and you can get up and walk. Anyway, the guy didn't show up at church and the other guy left. So afterwards, I went back over to his house and I was talking to him and I said, why aren't you getting out of this wheelchair? I've seen God heal you. Your legs move. Why aren't you doing this? And the guy finally broke down and cried. And he said, I used to be the sheriff and I got shot and that's what caused this paralysis. And I'm on disability and people honor me because I was hurt in the line of duty. And he says they respect me and they do all this. And if I got healed and got out of this, I'd lose my disability. People wouldn't honor me anymore. They might think that I was faking it this whole time. And anyway, because of these things, he would rather stay in a wheelchair, and he did. He stayed in the wheelchair because he would rather do that and have the respect of people and a government check coming rather than to be healed and to get up and have to do things. There's a lot of people that are in bad situations that have just adjusted to it, and they would rather stay there and suffer than to run the risk of change. I tell you, I do not understand that. I think that is an ungodly attitude. Yes, there is a possibility of failure. Yes, if you start believing God for more and you start taking the limits off God, you know what? There's the unknown. What's going to happen? If you were to take everything and just put it all on the table, instead of saying, God, I'll serve you as long as you don't send me to Africa, as long as you don't have me become a pastor, as long as you don't tell me to go to Bible school, or as long as whatever. But if you just put everything on the table and say, God, it's all here. I'll do anything. I run up a white flag. Whatever you want. I'll do whatever you want me to do. You know what? There is a possibility that God is going to have you do something that you don't want to do. And some of you, see, are just afraid of that. But I can promise you this. It says in Psalms chapter 37, verse 4, it says, delight yourself in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. That doesn't mean He'll just give you whatever you lust for. If it's another mate, if it's $1 million home or whatever. No, it's talking about you delight yourself in the Lord, and He puts His desires in your heart. He will change the desires of your heart. And if you truly commit yourself to the Lord, God's not going to ask you to do something that is just terrible to you. It may be something that in the natural you never would have thought of and you wouldn't have done, but once you commit yourself to the Lord, you'll love it. I've actually used this example before, of people saying, oh God, you're going to send me to Africa and make me live in a grass hut. And one of my friends, he came to me and he said, I grew up in a grass hut in Africa. And he said, it wasn't bad. He said, we had the nicest grass hut in the whole village and stuff. And people talk about how terrible that is. But, I've got people, we've interviewed them on our television program. Dottie Heyman is a woman who's in Kenya. And we had her on my television program not too long ago. And we put out a video of her. I have had so many people blessed by this video. But Dottie Heyman is a woman that I don't know how old she is, but I'm sure she's as old as I am, around my age or something. And when she was in her 60s, she left everything in the States and went to Kenya. And when she got to Bungoma, Kenya, she only had $100 left. She had no return ticket. She's been in Kenya for 11 years and has never come home, isn't planning on coming home. She went over there and yeah, God sent her to Kenya, but you know what? She is making an impact. She's got, I forgot how many, over a dozen kids now that she feeds and takes care of. She's got dozens of widows. She's making an impact all around the world. And Dottie, she puts out a newsletter and she'll just say, I'm the most blessed woman on the planet. She says, I'm so happy. Her life is fulfilled. God made her love what she's doing in Kenya. And I've been to her home there, and it's a nice home. It's nicer than many of the homes around, but it's not as nice as what most of us have in the States. But you know what? She loves it. It's what God has put in her heart. I'm just telling you that if you are afraid of change and you're afraid of what God's going to do, that will limit God. You don't need to say, God, I'll serve you as long as you never make me do this. You know, that's not making Jesus Lord. If Jesus is truly your Lord, then He's God and you aren't. And just whatever He tells you, that's fine. You just do it. You do it. It doesn't matter if it looks like it's going to cause problems. You just do it. And you have a confidence that God loves you more than you love yourself. God's plans for you. I used this the very first day I started teaching on this in Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11. I know the thoughts that I have towards you, says the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end. God's plans for you are better than your plans for yourself. And if God calls you to go to Africa or go to who knows where, it'll be because He put that desire in your heart. And He's not going to do things to hurt you. He's going to do things to bless you. You'll be happier in the will of God than you'll ever be outside of the will of God. So, one of the things that limits what God can do in your life is a fear of change. And you want everything to be stable. You want everything to be predictable. You know what? A godly life is not predictable. I was talking to somebody just the other day, and I was saying, man, isn't it exciting serving the Lord? Because, I mean, God, it is, if you're bored, I can guarantee you, you are not in the center of God's will. When you're following God, it's challenging. God is, I mean, He's constantly going to have you stretching out there and believing for things and putting yourself in a position where if God doesn't come through, you're going to fail. You know, I think that there's a lot of people that when they evaluate what they want to do with their life, they only plan, they only have goals of what they can do. But God is going to call you to do something that is beyond yourself. I remember a couple that went over to, the first couple that went over to Australia and started our office and our Bible school over there. I was in Australia with them, and we were going to start a service that night, and we were going to announce the beginning of the Bible school. And this man came to me just an hour or two before the service, and he says, I've got to tell you, I don't think I can do this. This is bigger than what I'm able to do. And he says, I think I'm going to have to quit. I'm going to have to bow out. I can't do this. And he waited for my response, and I said, that's great. And he was shocked. He says, what do you mean that's great? And I said, as long as you don't stop there and let your inadequacy stop you, I said, well, then that's great. It'll make you depend upon God. Call out to God for help. And I said, as long as you don't stop there, if you go beyond that and say, God, I can't, but through Christ, I can do all things. Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. I said, you're the exact person we want. And you know what? He and his wife started the school and the ministry and did a great job, and we saw great things. We now have another director over there, but they were a blessing for a long period of time. And God used them. I'm telling you, God is going to call you to do something beyond yourself so that you have to depend upon Him. If you're only doing things that you feel qualified to do, then I can guarantee you, you have not found God's will for your life. If your dreams and visions don't wake you up at night, you're dreaming too small. God is going to call you to do something that's beyond yourself. Man, that's certainly true with me. I was an introvert, couldn't look at a person in the face and talk to them, and now I talk to millions of people every day on television. God called me to do something that I had to get beyond myself to do. And I could just go through the Bible and show you person after person after person. Every one of them felt disqualified. And yet they learned how to trust in God. God is going to call you to do something bigger than yourself, something that is beyond yourself, so that it makes you depend upon Him. You know, when we have access to God and all of His power in our life, to live a life that is only humanly possible, it's stuff that you could do on your own if you just give it enough effort. I can guarantee you that is not God's will. God is never going to call you to do something that is just within your grasp. He's going to call you to do something that it takes Him to fulfill it. And that's a great way to live. So anyway, you don't need to be afraid of change. You don't want everything to be just static and the same. Man, living a life for God is exciting. You're going to be beyond yourself. You're going to be holding on to God for dear life. You know, I've often described my life just like being in a roller coaster, and I'm on that front car and I'm strapped in and holding on for dear life. But I am not driving it. I'm not controlling it. I am just trusting God, and God is leading me to do things that are way, way beyond ourselves. Did you know in just the last 6 years, 5.5 to 6 years, we have spent over $75 million on building a Bible college campus, because that's what God told me to do. And that's way beyond myself. And this is on top of the $3 or $4 million a month I need just to pay my radio and television bills, my staff, all of the materials we send out, our travel, our schools worldwide. On top of all of that, we've spent $75 million debt-free in the last 5.5 to 6 years. And I guarantee you, God is just leading me to do things that are way beyond myself. When we purchased this property up in Woodland Park, Colorado, the sanctuary up there, did you know I didn't have any money? I didn't have the money to do it. And yet, since 2009 till 2008, over $75 million has been spent above our normal expenses without going in debt. I'm telling you, that's beyond me. And God has shown me the future. I won't go into all of the details, but I'm estimating that it's going to cost me $100 million or more to finish building this campus and doing all of the things that God has told me to do. On top of that, we've expanded our television outreach. We just made one of the biggest steps in faith that we've ever made, that adds hundreds of thousands of dollars per month to my expenses. And I don't have it at this time. We're trying to finish up these buildings. We're doing all kinds of things. But you know what? It's what God called me to do. And I'm stretching. I'm stretching further than I've ever stretched. And I believe that this is what God has for every one of us. He doesn't have all of you being on television. He doesn't have you building a Bible college campus. But He will stretch you and call you to do something that is beyond your skill sets. If you're only doing what you can do, then I can guarantee you, you've missed God. You got to go beyond yourself. You don't need to fear the unknown. Did you know all of the things that I'm saying would be totally crazy if there wasn't a God who said, trust me and see if I won't come through for you. You know, I'll empower you. I'll bless the work of your hands. You've got so many promises that God is there, that He is drawing you to make a difference. Like this parable that I used, He wants you to take what He has given and multiply and increase and touch people and see the world a better place because of what you've done. Because of all of this, it is not crazy for you to believe and do things that are beyond your ability, because you've got a God who wants to enable you, wants to help you. He wants to get glory out of working through people that in the natural, it's beyond yourself. People look at it and say, it has to be God. You know, I've often told people that if I was God, I wouldn't have chosen me. I'm a hick from Texas. I couldn't look at a person in the face and talk to them. I don't use the best English. My voice, I just had some friends of mine making fun of my voice. This guy was saying that when he first saw me on television, he thought I was trying to imitate Gomer Pyle. I'm telling you, this is the way I normally talk. I'm not faking any of this. If I was God, I wouldn't have chosen me. And yet, I believe one of the reasons God chose me is because when miracles happen, when my son and my wife have been raised from the dead, when we see all of these miracles, financial and all of the things God is doing, people have to look at that and say, that is not that man. That man is not smart enough to do this. You know, I've used this example before, that my mother died in 2009. And right before she died, she asked me to tell her again all of the things that God was doing in the ministry. She was a big part of it, a big supporter of the ministry, and she was being blessed. And as I told her all of the things that were happening around the world and all of the good stuff, she looked at me and she said, Andy, you know this is God. And I said, yes, ma'am, I know this is God. And then she stuck her little bony finger right in my face and she says, you aren't smart enough to do this. And you know what? I agreed 100%. I cannot take credit. The only thing that I have done is like in that roller coaster, I've stayed in my seat. I am strapped in for the ride. I am following God. I haven't aborted. I hadn't bailed. But I can't take credit for what God is doing. I'm telling you, God chooses the weak things of the world, base things of the world, things that are despised, things that are nothing, to bring to naught things that are, and the purpose for that is so that no flesh can glory in His presence. God is going to call you to do something that you aren't qualified to do. And it'll make you depend upon Him, and then when you succeed, He will get all of the credit instead of you, because you aren't smart enough to do this. Man, that's awesome. So I say all of these things to say that you shouldn't fear the unknown. You shouldn't fear change. You know what I fear? Fear is probably not the right word, but I fear just being normal. Man, God didn't call any of us to be normal. You know, anybody can be just like everybody else and go through life and see nothing happen. Man, that would bother me. That would fear. It would cause fear on the inside of me to think that I'm just normal like everybody else. If you've been born again, if you have God on the inside of you, you should be supernaturally. Not just natural, but supernaturally. It ought to be God living through you. I remember some Jehovah's Witnesses coming to my house one time, and anyway, in the process of talking to them, I said things about God is working miracles in my life. And they said, no, God doesn't do miracles. And man, I went around and I could point to everything in our house and tell the miracle of how this came to pass. And anyway, they hit the door running because they don't believe in miracles. But you know what? If you can point to things in your life and say, I did this, this was my hard effort, this was my work, this is all stuff that I've produced, I'm a self-made man or woman. If you can say that, then I can guarantee you, you have missed God's will for your life. God, you need to take the limits off. You need to go beyond yourself. You need to get over into that supernatural realm where if God doesn't come through, you're done for. Man, I enjoy living out on a limb. You know, it's out on a limb where the fruit grows, but yet most people want to be a trunk hugger. They want to hug the trunk because they don't like blowing in the breeze, but it's out on the limb where the fruit grows. You need to get out on a limb. You need to go to trusting God. Some of you have more inspiration from God than what you've acted on because you're afraid and you're limiting God by not stepping out and taking these things.